I'm Charlie Ford and welcome back to my channel. Yes, I'm a veterinarian. Hot girls are allowed to dress hot too. If it makes you feel any better about the fact that I'm not in scrubs, I am wearing very crappy shoes currently, so. I got rid of my scrubs actually when I moved here 2 years ago, and I should get some more. But I'm a veterinarian, I worked in emergency, and I wanted to show you guys what might be toxic, or not even might, what is really toxic to dogs and to cats. These are ones that I saw pretty consistently in vet clinics, or things that I saw people talking about a lot and would always come and ask me. They'd be like, Charlie, you know, like, what, is this okay or not? So I want to walk you through the most common ones and what actually causes problems. And then from there, hopefully you'll be able to have a safer time with your pets at home and have less emergency visits and overwhelm my colleagues a little less. That would be very nice. So let's get started. So the first one that I most commonly get asked about is grapes. Grapes are very toxic to dogs and cats. A lot of people come into the clinic and they'll say to us as vets, you know, they only had 1 or 2 grapes. And the unfortunate thing with grapes is you can never know how many grapes is going to be toxic. The reason why actually lies in what causes the toxicity. So for years and years and years and years, we actually didn't know what caused a grape toxicity, and they discovered the reason, I'd say a couple of years ago now, maybe 3 years ago. And the reason lies in the same compound that makes baking soda or bicarb soda toxic. So what they've discovered is the compound that makes this toxic to dogs and cats also exists in grapes. But the amount that exists in grapes depends upon where they're grown, it depends on the temperature, it depends on what type of grapes they're growing, what part of the world you are in. And so because of this, even if a dog or a cat eats 1 grape, a vet will say we should make your animal vomit regardless. I would always try to make them vomit. Technically, food moves through the stomach after 2 hours. So if it's been 2 hours, you might not yield anything, but it's worth a shot to avoid a toxicity. Now, before I became a vet, I fed grapes to my dogs as treats all the time. Didn't know that they were toxic and never had a problem. But in clinic, I have also seen an Australian Shepherd that ate just 5 grapes. So a big dog ate 5 grapes. And what happens if they eat this compound is it causes heinous kidney failure. And that's what happened to this dog. And unfortunately, that dog had to be euthanized because we couldn't actually fix the problem. So even if your dog or cat eats 1 grape, take them to the vet and get them to vomit. Also, raisins are tiny little grapes, they're dried up grapes. So if your animals eat raisins or anything that contains raisins, you should also go and present to the vet clinic. The next one that I get asked about all the time is gum. Is gum toxic to dogs and cats? The answer is yes, and this is a very scary one. But it's tricky because not all gum has the product that actually is toxic to animals. So I managed to find one that has the ingredient in it, and I'm going to show it to you. If you see the word xylitol on the back of a packet, that is the ingredient that is super toxic to dogs and cats. So anything that has added fake sugar, you should be checking for xylitol. If you see mannitol or sorbitol, those fake sugars, they're totally fine. But xylitol, the reason why this is so toxic is it actually mimics sugar in the body. It's a sugar alcohol. And what happens is the pancreas sees the gum incoming and sees the xylitol incoming and goes, oh, that's sugar. I'm going to release insulin in order to take this sugar and store it. So then the body releases a bunch of insulin and starts storing the sugar that the animal has in their body naturally, but they don't have any extra sugar, extra glucose from this product that has fake sugar added. And so what happens is the body stores so much glucose that the levels get really low and they can have seizures. And I have seen animals be very scarily affected by xylitol. Luckily, it's a very easy problem to fix. I have never lost a patient with a xylitol toxicity, but it's definitely something that you need to present to a clinic with immediately. And usually you need to monitor them for a couple of days with their blood sugar levels. So expect a bit of a veterinary bill potentially with this one. The next thing that I thought I would talk to you about, which I get asked about really commonly, is onion. Onions are toxic to dogs and cats. The thing is, you have to eat a fair bit though for it to be toxic. So I've only ever seen this in person in a clinic once, and the dog that ate the onion, it got access to a bag of pre-cooked onion in a freezer. And so because it was cooked, it was more delicious and more sugary, and so it wanted to eat more. Raw onion, a lot of animals don't like the taste of it, so they don't tend to eat enough to get a toxicity. They actually don't know what compound in onion causes the problem, but what happens is that it takes the red blood cells and blows them up. So they kind of explode. And then the animals get what we call an anemia, which is a low level of red blood cells. And when you have low red blood cells, because your red blood cells carry oxygen around your body, it causes you to have low oxygen in the rest of your body, and that can affect your organs and make you very sick. So that is why onions are very bad for dogs. If you feed your dog like a teaspoon of soup left over from a dinner and it's got a tiny piece of onion, it's probably not going to cause a problem. The last time I checked, for cats the toxic dose was around 5 grams per kilo, and for a dog it was around 15 grams per kilo, but the research changes all the time. So I should preface this entire video by saying that nothing that I say is set in stone, and if your animal eats any of these, regardless of what information I give you, you should go see a vet regardless. The next thing that I get asked about a lot is macadamia nuts. So macadamia nuts is also a food group where we don't actually know what causes them to make animals sick. But the biggest things that we see is depression, like a central nervous system depression. They get really weak, they get tremors, and the tremors can cause them to increase their body temperature to a point that it affects their organs, and can cook their organs and put them into organ failure. So if your animal eats any of these macadamia nuts, they should definitely see a vet. I actually had my own personal experience with macadamia nuts with Lola. She's not here, the little turd. Decided to, so in one of my houses that I lived in when I was a vet student, I didn't know that there was a macadamia nut tree in the backyard. And so one day she starts vomiting, I have no idea why. Take her to the emergency center and they say, it looks like a macadamia nut on ultrasound. And I was like, that's impossible. She can't have had access to them. Turns out she did have access to it, but it wasn't the nut itself that made her sick. She swallowed the macadamia nut inside the casing, the shell. So dogs and cats can actually smell these nuts through the shell. And so Lola managed to swallow the nut whole, and it lodged into her intestines, and then she had to have surgery to have it removed. Luckily, I caught it early, so she didn't have to lose any intestine, and she made a full recovery, but it was very scary and very expensive, and I 10 out of 10 do not recommend. The next one that I want to talk to you about is one that everybody knows. Chocolate. Oh my God, I'm gonna eat some. So chocolate has a compound called theobromine in it. So theobromine is found in cocoa or cacao. So if you eat milk chocolate, it has a lower level of theobromine than dark chocolate because there's a different level of cocoa. So what I would often do when I was in a vet clinic is if someone had a dog that had eaten some chocolate, I would go to Google and type in chocolate calculator for dogs. And in there, you can put in how many grams they've eaten, what type of chocolate they've eaten, and it will calculate for you whether you're in a toxic level and should go present to a vet or not. Using those calculators is amazing. It has saved so many people from having to present to an emergency clinic. Because if you have a giant dog that's eaten one tiny little milk dud, it's not going to have symptoms. But if you have a Chihuahua that eats one of these, they could have symptoms. And the symptoms, it makes their heart race. They get we call it tachycardia. They can get a temperature, they can get tremors. And so basically they need to be made to vomit. They need to be given charcoal because charcoal helps to stop the chocolate from being absorbed into the body. And then they'd often get admitted and put on a drip if they were bad enough, and the fluids help them to process. the compound, and we can also keep an eye on them and monitor them for any progressively worsening symptoms. And usually they would go home in 12 hours, rarely 24. I've never seen a dog pass away from this, but I have definitely heard of it when people underestimate how ill chocolate can make their pets. So I definitely recommend calling a vet if your animal eats chocolate and talk to them to work out whether the toxic dose is enough that you should present to a vet. The next one is avocados. So avocados contain a compound called persin. It's found in the fruit, the seed, the leaves, the stalk, everything. So persin can cause vomiting and diarrhea, and it can also cause heart damage. And that's even if you just think about the persin. Avocados in general are a very fatty fruit. And so they can also cause pancreatitis and tummy upsets just from the fat alone, let alone the persin as well. The other thing that you have to be careful of with avocados is the pit inside. I have looked after many dogs that ended up swallowing this pit and they hadn't chewed it up, and then I had to go in with a big camera and scoop it out of their stomach and pull it out of their esophagus. So they can also, if they start to move through the intestine, they can cause a blockage as well. So avocados are a no-no, unfortunately. The last one, which is fun because it's very, very, very nice, is alcohol. I think it's obvious. Alcohol affects dogs and cats the same way as people. I have definitely been at parties where drunken people have given like Jello shots to their dogs to make them drunk, but you've got to understand that their bodies are so much smaller than ours, and so you have way less control over whether that is going to be something that's going to be toxic to your dog or cat than when we are drinking and we can feel the effects. The interesting thing about alcohol, the reason why I chose to talk about alcohol, is there is one time where alcohol actually ends up being a treatment for dogs and cats. And that is if they eat antifreeze. So if your animal is to eat antifreeze and you present to a vet clinic, they actually get admitted and they get given a drip of vodka, because the vodka actually helps to reverse the antifreeze. I find that really cool. I've never seen it because I've always worked in hot countries. And also if your dog eats antifreeze, do not just go and give your animal vodka, because it's a very specific amount and it needs to be given over a steady amount of time, and it needs monitoring because it can be a really intense amount of alcohol. But basically you get them drunk to save them from their terrible decisions. So these are the most common ones that I get asked about, but if you have other ones that you are wondering if they are toxic or not, put them in the comments or reach out to me and I will make a part 2 covering more things that are toxic to animals. But hopefully this helps you guys, and I will see you around, hopefully not in the emergency room though. Bye.